All right, I think we are finally getting situated here, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Public Safety Committee of the City Council. All members of the committee are present via Zoom, and Councillor Pat Davis will actually be joining us shortly. This is a remote or online meeting where all participants will be on video or audio conference. We are holding this meeting remotely to allow everyone to participate safely while we are conducting business under a public health emergency. We appreciate your patience. First up on the agenda is the public safety annual update presentations from the administration. We're going to go first with APD with Chief Medina, followed by Roger Ebner of the Emergency Management. Then following Mr. Ebner will be Chief Dow with AFR. So without further ado, Chief Medina.
Madam Chair, members of council, thank you for allowing us this afternoon to make a presentation that is going to kind of be a recap of what we had occur this past year. We're going to focus on 4 areas. Number 1, crime control. That is our number 1 concern for the city. That's the topic that affects most citizens of the city of Albuquerque. Number 2, our settlement agreement, where we are at with our settlement agreement at this point in time. Number 3, outreach. We're going to specifically look at youth outreach. As we know, the youth are a building block for the future, and it's one of the areas where we focus our outreach. And the 4th part that we're going to briefly go over is just our recruiting campaign and strategies from now till June to get us to the numbers that we wanted to be and what council has funded us for. So if you look at the first slide, does everybody have a copy of the, do we have a way to share that?
And Chief Medina, I do believe Mr. Moya is working on that, and all councillors were emailed the presentation.
Okay, cool. The first slide, if we go down to the property crime slide, property crimes accounts for 75% of all crime in Albuquerque. People are more likely to feel the effects of property crime than any other type of crime, and property crime is down 20% in the last 3 years. As we go to the next slide, we'll talk about violent crime. Violent crime accounts for 15% of all crime in Albuquerque. Most people are not directly affected by violent crime, but these crimes really make people feel unsafe. Homicide, robbery, shootings. Most target repeat and violent offenders to keep them off the streets. We must be proactive, and we must not stop at being proactive in our relentless pursuit of these individuals who are committing these crimes. Right now, Albuquerque is just 2 out of 67 of the largest cities where violent crime has not spiked this year as it has in other cities of our size and that are considered major cities. What are we doing to address some of our violent crime issues? Is we have our citywide anti-crime operations. These started in mid-August. We've arrested 550 offenders, recovered 86 firearms, and during this time we've also recovered 67 stolen vehicles. The reason that we focus on, and we mentioned stolen vehicles, is in 2017, when we came back, that was our number 1 goal at the time, was stolen vehicles. Albuquerque was number 1. We have then dropped since number 2, and we'll get into some slides that really explain our stolen vehicle problem. We're also working with our Metro 15 operations. That's the next slide. And we work with the prosecutor's office to target offenders who we can successfully prosecute. It's a simple fact that we want to invest our resources in those individuals that we're more likely to kick off the streets for longer periods of time. It's just wisely investing our resources to make sure that we go after the individuals that we're going to have success with. It takes more patience, but the patience pays off, and we've had 50 arrests since the program has started. The violence interruption program is exactly as it states. It's a process of us intervening. We know that if somebody is the victim of a shooting, they're either going to be there's a high likelihood they're going to be a victim again, or they're going to be a offender in a shooting. The VIP has made 74 custom notifications. That's when we visit individuals at their location to talk to them about not retaliating and not being involved in any further shootings. If you want to go to the next slide. Message: community values human life and the lives of group members, but they must choose to stop the violence is kind of the message we put out with these individuals. Tomorrow I'll be going out and we'll be making some notifications, another series of notifications with individuals in the community. Of the 74 individuals contacted, not one has picked up a gun, and 24 have reached out for services, and 41 service referrals have been made. This is about taking them out of the cycle of violence, getting them out of the process that they're involved in. This really went live in August, kind of about an August, September timeframe also. So when we talk about reductions in shootings from August till now, by us getting that number for the year down, these are some of the programs we think that helped us. The anti-crime initiatives and the violent interruption program are some of the keys that helped us start to get that peak that was going on down back to numbers that we had in the previous years. Auto theft by year comparison, if we go to the next slide, we know that auto theft in 2017 was the number one issue the community was facing. We were number one in the country. The metro area had almost 10,000 cars stolen, with 8,000 coming from the city of Albuquerque. Did you see in 2017, we had 8,157 cars stolen. In 2018, we reduced that to 5,563. In 2019, we reduced it again to 4,926. And in 2020, we're at 3,568, which is another trend for us lowering this number. It looks like we're going to be close to another double-digit reduction, and we'll just have to see how the rest of the year turns out. But if you go to the next, chart, that this really shows where we were as a city. I mean, you can see how we've continually declined the number. Of course, we have about 14 days that are going to add into that, but we average about 50 to 60 stolen cars a week. So you can look at that, 3,568, maybe going up another 150. We're still going to be well below the 2019 numbers for a third year in a row where we have a reduction in auto theft numbers. The next slide just kind of breaks it down by the quarters over the year, the past year. As you can see, our last quarter has some of the lowest numbers, so it's consistent. Early spring, January, February, March, typically when we see warm-up thefts, we have some of our highest numbers. So we continue to work on this and ensure that we're lowering our auto theft numbers. We're going to move on to our court settlement agreement. There's a link to it provided. If anybody hasn't ever read the settlement agreement or wondering about it, we could go to the next slide for that. And we'll skim over that once people have a chance, and we'll go to the settlement agreement. And I think the most important thing here to remember is the settlement agreement is capturing several categories. Use of force, their investigation, ensuring that we're tracking it, we're making corrections, we're being transparent about it. Specialized units such as the utilization of SWAT, SID units, other units, crisis intervention, making sure that we're moving forward with having a good program that helps us deal with those that are going through a mental crisis. Policies and training, making sure that we're developing a good, strong policies, making sure that we have a process for doing that, making sure that we're training our individuals and the curriculum is developed properly. Misconduct, complaints, how they're taking the investigations and the adjudications. Staffing, management, and supervision, that really has to do a lot with, for the most part, with what our supervisors are doing. Are they holding their individuals accountable for administrative functions during the course of their shift? Did they show up with their proper firearm? Did they do a monthly inspection of them and their equipment? Did we have a ratio of 8 officers to 1 supervisor at the most? Recruiting and selection and promotions. We know that we want to be diverse in our recruitment efforts. We want to make sure that we recruit the right individuals, that we see all the red flags and don't select individuals and processes where we shouldn't. And we make sure that we have a strong promotional process that takes into account basically somebody's career. officer assistance and support to just say, making sure that the mental health of our officers is met and that we give them the support they need when they need it. And the last part is community engagement and oversight. In all, if we go to the next slide, it's 344 paragraphs. 276 of those paragraphs have a measure for us for compliance. The 3 levels of compliance: primary, secondary, operational. We go to the next sheet, we'll see that in IMR, from IMR 11 to IMR 12, we still are at 100% primary. That means we've developed the proper policy and procedure. If you look 92, 91 on the secondary compliance, we did lose some there because of some struggles that the academy had. We have made some corrections there, but we only lost 2% and we're back to 91%. Operational, we went from 66 to 64. There is a possibility that there wasn't the change in leadership at the police department through midway through IMR 13. So those numbers potentially could still go down, but we're hoping that some of the changes we've made and the processes we've already developed are going to minimize that. That's where we are with the settlement agreement. We know that we're working with DOJ right now to help us get some external investigators who can kind of teach and show our investigators how these investigations on force need to be done, what the expectations are, and make sure that we're moving towards compliance in that area. We're setting up internal processes to make sure that if somebody's not holding their individual officers accountable, that it's flagged and that it's moved up the chain and that we see that. And we're also working to ensure that we develop our investigators, not just for force, but in all areas. We're hoping by June to have the first ever Investigators Academy where our people actually get a kind of certification that they're investigators, or in the past, it just basically was a lot of on-the-job passing the baton of type of training. Community engagement is the next slide. There are currently 24 schools involved in the Imprint program. This basically, a lot of officers go out and they work with the students. In 2020, 747 kids were engaged. New Imprint officers picked up. We had 5 more officers trained up in this program, for a total of 25 officers who basically can go out to the schools and work with kids in a variety of different outreach. They work with APS on other projects. They delivered 22 Thanksgiving meals. They worked with some community partners and Cottonwood Mall and Dream Big, Albuquerque Fire Rescue to gather 100 Thanksgiving meal boxes. They helped Highland High School for a turkey Thanksgiving meal box, 17 boxes, kind of a duplicate of that last one there. They have ornament events where they did a lot of different work with ornaments, and they were delivered to different places like Kerry King Hospital. Christmas card events, students from 3 schools colored and created cards for senior centers, 750 cards out to the community, especially the retirement centers. Shop with the Cop, Heroes for the Holidays. They worked with Cottonwood Mall. They also did some other programs where they gave a total of 20 kids gift bags, and they chaperoned officers kids as they shopped at the different malls. If we go down to the next page, let's go one more. One more page. I got ahead there, we're going quickly. One more page. Okay. Our big thing was we had changed the camps in 2018. In the past, APD youth camps were done at the APD Academy only, and basically it was 50 cops kids for the most part that showed up, and it really wasn't a form of community engagement. We changed this out to the community, so now it occurs in the 4 quadrants of the city, 1 camp plus 1 more older camp that's geared towards some of our older kids in the community, and each day they work with these kids. This year, due to COVID, we had to go virtually online with it. Early in the process, I talked to Lieutenant Legendre, and we ended up doing 31 videos 1.5 hours a day for 5 days that we were able to get these kids through it. And for our first run at a virtual camp, we had 100 youth participate in the program. So we're pretty proud that we're able to make that adjustment and work with some of the kids in our community. Trying to go to the next slide. They included videos from SWAT, K9 bombs, horses, shared lunch and discussed APT's core values. APT Wallace coordinator provided youth with exercise videos. They started each day with PT, and we did this in partnership with the fire department and with the National Guard. They provided some other type of training like fire safety, gun safety, and narcotics. We could go to the next page. Our goal this year is right now, in December of 2017, we're at about 836 officers. We're now at 975. We had 9 just graduate this past week from the Lateral Academy. We have 51 in the cadet class that graduates in March. We're hoping to have 15 laterals seated for a spring class. That's at 0 now because they're focusing on the 124. The 124, we're hoping to have 75 seated. We already have 36. We've been averaging about 15 to 20 at chief selection each month. So if we maintain those numbers, we will get to the 75, and that'll be one of our largest academy classes. And as long as time can, most of us can remember, the attrition from the academy, we know that everybody that starts the academy doesn't finish the academy. So we have 13 there. That brings us to an 11, 12 number. You got to take into consideration there that we probably could lose up to 20 to 25 people due to retirements in the first half of the year. So we may come in just a little bit under the 1,100 mark, but we'll have to see with what retirements look like and how our training continues to go on our recruiting. So with that, it's a brief overview of what we had for this past year and where we're at now as a department and what our goal is, especially with recruiting. This next year, we really want to focus on reducing our shootings as we have these last 3 months and developing that culture of accountability and doing work just because it's our everyday job and not necessarily it being an anti-crime operation. We're also working on some quality control measures, reference overtime, making sure that we're looking at it ourselves proactively on our own at the beginning each quarter rather than waiting for something to occur and it being the front page of the newspaper. So we are trying to be as proactive, and I think that's the number one culture we want to develop for this department, is that culturally we're very proactive, whether it be with crime, with monitoring our budget, monitoring our overtime, knowing what kind of fleet funding we're going to need, knowing how we're going to get to our recruiting numbers to make sure that we have enough people coming into the department to continue the growth that we're being funded. And with that, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief Medina. And looks like Councillor Davis is joining us as well. And just as a reminder for councillors to use the raise the hand button so I can call on you. And first up, we have Councillor Jones and Councillor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, Chief Medina, you say we have 975 sworn officers now. Of that 975, how many are working the streets and actually in crime? How many are in the academy? Give me a percentage. How many are actually patrolling, either on foot, in car, and how many are teaching classes in the academy, serving on committees and panels, and that do not require or have personal contact with our citizens on the streets?
You know, I'm glad you, Madam Chair, Councillor Jones, I'm glad you brought that question up. Cecily Barker will be sending the document now. It's a new monthly form that we've developed. It's still work in progress. And in that monthly form is a distribution of patrol officers to each of the area commands, and those are going to be our officers that are responding to calls for service. So if I believe that Cecily's going to be pulling those numbers up, and we'll get back. But right now, I think we've provided some of this information in the past, and some of the numbers will be included in this monthly. So just give us 1 second. Let's see if we can pull up, or if we can come back, we can give you some of those numbers of how our officers are distributed right now.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we hope to circle back to that. Councillor Bassan, then Councillor Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions that came up from that PowerPoint. First, though, Chief, thank you so much for particularly the status report. I think that's on par with some of the questions that we've been asking and being able to see. And I realize that we're going to get a little bit more fine-tuned information coming up. But in regards to that as well, as to what Councillor Jones was asking, I'm wondering too, do you have an estimate? And I know that there's no final number, and I'm sure it changes regularly, but I don't see any kind of attrition for any kind of retirements or other people leaving after time. Do we have a general average percentage of what that looks like?
It seems like our numbers are anywhere from 20 to 30, with 25 being a good number for the first half of the year. We do tend to see more people retire in the second half, especially around December timeframes. And the second half, we seem to see a retirement rate of 30 to 40. We have had a number of terminations and other people leave the department this year, but we're expecting that the first half that we could lose, if it's in average with what we've seen in the past, 25 to 30.
Thank you. Chief, is that with 30 to 40 per half of the year or the whole year?
Per half of the year.
So generally 25, yeah. 25 for half of the year is what we're looking at.
25 for the first half, and we do see an increased amount, it seems like, in the second half of the year.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I have a few more if that's all right. Thank you. Chief, what is the acronym, please forgive me, what is the acronym IMPRINT for? What does that mean?
I know what it is. We'll get the exact acronym sent out to council later. I don't know exactly what the word.
Okay, I haven't heard of it before, so I'm curious. When we have 25 officers, is that 25 officers are designated full-time for this program, or they kind of dabble in it? What is the expectation with that?
It's a secondary duty that they do when they have time, and most of them average about a couple hours here and there during the course of the month, depending on if there's school in session, if there's not school in session. It's not a permanent job. It's kind of like how we're building the ambassador program, or kind of how we built some of our underage drinking efforts funded by council, is where we have individuals do this as a collateral job, and they take care of it either with a little bit of overtime, or they adjust during the course of their shift to get these activities taken care of. And IMPRINT doesn't stand for anything specific. It's just the name of the program.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chief. And then when you were talking about I think you said the investigator training, hopefully rolling out June-ish next year. And I love that idea. I'm absolute proponent of it. If we can get an update as you all start seeing what that might look like, I think that would be something we would all be very interested in.
We're trying to move on it really quickly, Councillor, and I think we set a deadline of February. We met this morning about it, to develop the core curriculum that it has to contain. And the goal is to train a general investigator, which is something we've never done in the past. And for every investigator to have a certification. Once we get them with that basic training, we could then add in the specialized training to their specialized areas. And we could start offering that to individuals before they go to investigations in the future as a means of career development.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I think that sounds fantastic. And Madam Chair, just one more. My last question, Chief, is is there any kind of thought process between COVID this year and everybody being at home as to maybe that's also part of why there's less auto theft, burglaries?
Madam Chair, Councilor Bazan, I think that it's really difficult. I think at the beginning when COVID started, if you looked at our April, May, June numbers, we saw a lot of the crimes go down. Even shootings, homicides, we almost broke even at that point in time, especially with shootings. But since then, I think there's been some COVID fatigue and we've seen numbers steadily increase from July through now in a variety of ways. And I guess the best way I could sum this up is if somebody's willing to steal a car, I don't think they're willing to obey a public health order. So I think that we still have a lot of criminals nationwide. The trend is they're seeing great increases in violent crime. So I think it's really hard for us to give a definite yes or no. But I do want to say that our auto theft unit is consistently out there. They're probably one of our most proactive units we have in this department. And they're making arrests, it seems like, daily when they have operations of individuals who are stealing cars.
Thank you, Chief. That makes sense. That's fair. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Urban?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, I really had approximately the same question as Councilor Bassan. I was, and maybe you could just fine tune this and get it to us later. Over the last 10 years, what's the average retirement number? It sounded to me like it's in the vicinity of 70 annually. So I would just like confirmation of that, because we subtract that from what we're talking about, and I appreciate your very optimistic outlook, and I hope it's correct.
Mr. Stringy. Doing good. Okay.
Hello. Well, you see something new every day. Where was I? Yeah, annual average retirement, just so that we have a good sense of where we are. But if your projections are correct and it is 70, then we're still 67 ahead. So hallelujah for that, if we can pull that off. But thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor. And Madam Chair, Councilor Jones, we have right around 510 that are taking calls for service right now in one form or another in the department, assigned to field services. And I want to say that investigations is right around the 200 mark at this point in time. And we're 185 for investigations and
professional standards.
And professional standards is 145, but that's total number of employees, and that includes CIT and civilians. And I think the number to look at the most is we've added to investigations over the past couple of years. The criminal investigation side, we had a homicide unit that had 5 detectives. I think when I got back, they're now at 12. They're now should have about 12. If they're not in the selection process, but they're allocated 12 detectives. And the reason why we give detectives a portion with every bunch and not just out to the field is you have to develop people in those units. And it makes no sense for us to grow the field and then all of a sudden we say, add in 7 homicide detectives and we're trying to get 7 people trained up at the same time. So there is a method to making sure that as we add resources to the department that we're feeding them into the different areas so that we control the growth and we can get individuals trained in their specialties. We're hoping this academy will help us move that along faster also.
And since this was originally Councillor Jones's question, I want to make sure that that was sufficient. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief. I appreciate that information.
Madam Chair, just with one last thing, like I said, we're sending out our first monthly report from APD. It's going to have some information on there. It has a report from field services this month. Next month, we'll be adding in another Bureau investigations. There is a section where if council asks questions, we could start answering them in this monthly report. So there's a written monthly response. And if anybody has any ideas how we could improve this report, just let us know, and we're more than willing to listen and to modify the report as needed. So it should be getting to your email boxes. It may already be in your email boxes. So that's our first attempt at a monthly to kind of keep council updated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And before you leave, Councillor Benton, was there anything I see that your hand's raised.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, to come back, but yeah, just to clarify once again the numbers, Chief, and I appreciate you being so forthcoming and about these, but so 510 on the average, 510 officers out taking calls on patrol, plus 195 in investigations. Is that about right?
Yes, that's about right.
So that's a lot of, I think the common perception is there are way too many officers sitting, sworn officers sitting around. I don't purport that any of them are sitting around, but I do oftentimes ask the question, how can we backfill some of these positions with civilians? Which ones are those positions where we can backfill them with civilians and then get sworn officers on the street? But besides that, that's pretty good numbers if you're roughly, at 700 out of 975 are taking calls. That sounds a heck of a lot better. They're not taking calls, but they're working against crime, including investigation. Then that to me means, that many people are working in crime prevention as opposed to all good things we know to train officers and to deal with the CASA settlement. And that's why I'm always asking you, what is our headroom to get civilians into some of those positions? And I'm always going to be supportive of that to just, increase the people power while putting more officers on the street. So thank you, Madam Chair. No question there, Chief, just that's 2 cents worth.
Thank you for that, Councillor Benton. I will say, in thinking about these presentations for this committee, I wanted to make sure that we have an overall kind of picture coming into the next year. So I'm looking forward to the monthly updates, Chief Medina, and really appreciate this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and everybody have a nice evening.